bring on our guest here for Birdland. You might know him as being one of the managers of the Baltimore Orioles, helped them get back to a place that they hadn't seen success in a while. But I like to just think of a guy that has some of the best baseball knowledge you'll ever hear, but above all, just the life lessons, and is one of the most genuine individuals. So let's bring on Buck Showalter.
Ryan, how you looking, kid?
How you doing?
I'm still fooling them. How about you?
I'm hanging out. Can't complain. It's what? If I saw you a month ago, we were sitting down.
That
was a great time. Where are you right now? Are you chilling at home for the time being, or are they keeping you busy for the postseason?
I've been in Dallas. I'm in Dallas, Texas right now. I've been here for 20-something years. When I took the Ranger job years ago, Ryan, you know how it is moving around. You guys were lucky because you got to stay in one place for the most part. But I promised my daughter and my son that I wouldn't move till they got out of high school and college. They went to Southern Methodist, went to TCU, went to high school here. And, we kind of are stuck here in a ways. So it's been good. It's been good. I'm in Dallas. Been here for a while.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm glad you mentioned that. I think people do forget at times for this baseball season lifestyle, you would love to be in the same spot as much as you can for your work. Yeah. But in the coaching world, the playing world, it's not always how it's going to be. Buck, I grew up on the wrong side of understanding. My dad gave me this false understanding of, oh, wait a minute, I can go to the big leagues. Everyone's dad does that. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I can play for the same team for 20 years? Everyone does that. I mean, Buck, how many organizations have you worked with over the year?
Jeez, I don't really think about it. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5.
You've made your way around, and obviously then playing, just going from place to place as you were trying to continue to work your way up, which – it's a whole other game and mindset. We were talking about car issues or road hiccups. You have any story or one that sticks out to you during your professional career as a coach or player of things going wrong on the road?
Most of them, Ryan, seem to go, they've improved the minor league way of life, and I commend them for it because some of the stuff was almost criminal, but it also was a certain bonding or whatever. I think most of those stories come from the minor league bus ride days. I remember our bus driver got sick and had to go to the back of the bus, but we were coming down Lookout Mountain in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I was playing in Double-A in the Southern League. Your dad was playing in Charlotte, and I had to go down there and drive the bus. He put it in third gear where it wouldn't go over 45, and I remember the guys waking up one by one they see the bus driver come by and go in the bathroom, and then they see the truck still moving. The bus. I just raised my hand. I said, I got it, guys. Don't worry. We're not, not getting through customs, trying to go to London, Ontario because somebody popped off to a customs guy. We barely made the game. Won't tell you who that player was years later. Just mostly minor league trips. I used to entertain the guys, Ryan. We had this Watts line that we would call in the game reports. And it was a flat fee, and the Yankees. So I would call all these universities and get their nickname. And I would do this matching quiz for the players, North Dakota Tech, Montana State A&M or whatever. And Andy Stankiewicz, I remember he got all of them right. But the guys used to look forward to it. I used to try to entertain them on those 10, 11, 12. You throw your stuff in the hotel and go to the park and play. You drove all night and you didn't stop to get water or hydrate. There was this thing called beer on the bus, unfortunately. That was the only thing that was liquid.
Oh, God.
I've got a few, but I'm going to leave it at that. I'm sure you do, too. What was your worst bus ride story, Ryan?
Oh, man. Well, first off, before I tell mine, I just want to clarify this. So bus drivers got to go yak. Something's going wrong. And then Buck Showalter, current player, goes, I got this. I'm going to take over this bus. Don't worry. Did you know how to drive that bus?
What's funny is his name was Snuffy Miller. You can't make it up. He was a drummer for Conway Twitty. You can't make it up. And I used to go up in the front to keep him awake. And I was kind of towards the end of my career, and we had a relationship. I'd been there a while, and he said, "Hey, can you handle this down the hill till I got to go to the bathroom?" He had some issues going on, trust me. And I said, "Well, yeah, I guess so." He goes, "I'll put it in such gear. I'll be back shortly." Well, he was back there for about 20, 30 minutes. It was, driving that big bus, you're holding the wheel like this and you're bouncing down the hill. Ask Mattingly about it someday. He was on that bus.
Don Mattingly was on that bus with you too?
Oh, yeah. Willie McGee.
Wow. Okay, so this is why I love – you know what, Buck? This is the thing. I'm glad that they've changed things for the minor leagues.
Without a doubt.
However, I think that these are the stories that really, really describe what minor league ball was.
You know, Ryan, and I look back at those times. You know, they've got, Mondays off now, and they play like 4 or 5 game sets with a team. There's no way in the minor leagues when we play, we could have played a team that many times without being in a fight by the 3rd day. There's just no way. No, you know what? The only thing I kind of worry about is these guys get to the big leagues. They get Monday off. They get a load management day, and they don't really realize what it's like to play every day in the big leagues. I had a guy, Francisco Alvarez, came to the big leagues. He was upset after about his 3rd week there in the catching guy. I said, hey, Francisco's really upset. And I go, what's the problem? He's mad at the minor leagues because they didn't prepare him for catching as much as he's being asked to catch up here. And that's really what you're doing. You see guys come to the big leagues with very few innings as a pitcher.
Yeah.
And there's a certain skill in learning how to post up. And sometimes I think guys, that's what catches people by surprise when you get to the big leagues, is you are expected to post up. I bet you know a little something about that, right?
Yeah, I know a little bit, but and this is the thing is I want to dive more into that because that is fascinating to me because you're onto something and a question I want to ask you later. But I wanted to tell you at least my bus story, and we'll move on to that. We were coming back from Asheville, North Carolina. They were the Asheville Tourists at this time, and I was playing for the Hagerstown Suns, which no longer exists. They got rid of Municipal Stadium. It's gone. But we were coming back from Asheville, and all of a sudden, we see some smoke popping up from the engine. And so we pull the bus over on the highway, and I think we won. We were doing well that year. And all of a sudden, the driver just goes and just pours water because it overheated on the engine. Like, okay, yeah, we'll be good. We're on our way. All of a sudden, 30 minutes goes by. That engine is steaming again. And so he poured the rest of his water. And by the 4th time, we had no more water left, or he had, because apparently he had a gallon, that we took all the players. And actually, it was a doubleheader that day. We had a doubleheader. We took all the water from the players, collected it, dumped it on the bus. Then the GM of Hagerstown met us 2 hours out to then continue to pour water on our engine until we got back.
Hey, who's the manager of that team?
That team for us, it was Patrick Anderson, I think. PA was our manager then at that time. I was with the Nationals.
It's funny. I was thinking today, Ryan, that, one of the things that I was lucky to have is that there was something about being able to evaluate whether a guy could be a big leaguer. I don't know. I had Brady Anderson. I would say, hey, go down to Bowie and sit on Manny Machado for 3 days. Go down there and sit on John Scope. I had Scotty McGregor with the pitchers. I had B.J. Sherhoff and Mike Bordick. I had guys that would go down there and look at guys through that big league prism, and they would tell me how far away they thought. That's how we discovered Caleb Joseph. Nobody thought he could play, but he ended up being a backup catcher for a long time. Because Brady Anderson came back and said, "Hey, this guy's a big league backup catcher." I'm telling you, and he was right. Brady was such a great resource for me because players loved him, and he worked, but he loved trying to help players, and he was a good evaluator. So were those other guys. BJ, we brought them all into camp, and Mike Flanagan used to come in my office and give me little tidbits about what to do and not to do with the owner, and he was great about it. Really helped me.
Yeah, you know what? And this is the fascinating behind the scenes, and knowing, for me a little bit, knowing how you work, you really try to get a pulse, and you trust your guys to evaluate what you see with your eyes, right? That's a big part that I know you look at is, what does your eyes tell you? What is going on there? And go ahead. I remember we had a situation where John Scope was like 2021, and he was hitting over on a field away from us in the minor leagues. And I kept hearing this sound, this clean click, every time he made contact with the ball. And I asked him, I said, "Who's that kid over there?" So that's John Scope from Curacao. I said, "That's what it sounds like." And I said, "Bring him over here."
And he started hitting with us. And one of our analytic guys, yes, we had analytics. We had sabermetrics. We just didn't have 20 of them. We had 6. And he started looking at the exit velocities and stuff. And he said, wow. He said, how'd you know that? I said, that sound, I could hear that sound you listen for. Ryan, you know what I'm talking about, that click of a big league hitter. It's not that muffled rattle around the barrel for a little while. I mean, I remember the first time I heard John hit, I went, wow, that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and you know what? This is kind of where I wanted to go with this conversation, right? Because I think we talked about this when you and I were doing the Baseball Warehouse event, and we were talking a little bit about, the game has evolved. The game has changed, but there are analytics. And one thing that people didn't know maybe as much about with you that you shared, you with your staff members, you were guys always wanted to learn what these analytics meant. Like, okay, tell us, explain this to me. What's it mean? And usually though.
And what does it not tell us?
And what does it not tell us? Right. So the thing is, a lot of the things that you're talking about, your eyes, your sound of what you're listening to was dictating what then the analytics would say. Like I would tell people now with like the whole launch angle conversation, right? If they're like, hey, you got to hit it, 20 degrees or hit it between 10 and 25, whatever it is, sweet spot. Well, it's like, well, if you get a hold of a ball and you crush it and you hear the sound of the bat and that ball goes 420, guarantee you the analytics are probably going to show you that the launch angle, whatever it is good because the hitter went and did it. But you're seeing that with your eyes. Where do you kind of, in your mind, draw the line on that? Because there is good value, but also there's a lot of value in, this was one of my favorite quotes, Buck. Joe Torre, is the first time I heard it was from Joe, was you can't measure a player's heartbeat. You can't measure the moment.
Well, the good decisions, Ryan, are made on player evaluation when both of them match up. Mm-hmm. I remember watching Don Mattingly hit off left-handed pitching, just watching him. He never gave in. He hit the breaking ball well, and I said, boy, this guy hangs in there good against left-handed hitters. Then you get the numbers and everything to back it up. Mm-hmm. And now this guy's not a platoon player. When you can mesh those two things, hey, this is what the makeup part of, this is what inside the clubhouse, here's what's going on. It's like, the Gold Glove stuff just came out. And I won't get into people or anything, but I was talking to somebody, Harold Reynolds, but it doesn't tell you who can relay the baseball. It doesn't tell you who can tag people well. J.J. Hardy was the best tagger I ever saw, and he taught people how to tag. We got 5 to 7 outs a year because he knew how to V-tag as opposed to U-tag. Anyway, long story. But it doesn't tell you how they turn the double play. It doesn't tell you necessarily the range in the air. Can they go back and get pop-ups? It doesn't tell you all the things. We get this every year for the Gold Glove where they're telling us basically who to vote for, zone ratings and all that stuff. That's the one area where I don't think they've really cracked the code of how to properly define and grade defense. Because quite frankly, some of those guys there's a couple of guys on the Gold Glove that people down in the dugout are shaking their head. They're going, no way, this guy shouldn't be in this. Francisco Lindor's not considered for a Gold Glove. What shouldn't he get some type of credit because he played 155 games at that level as opposed to somebody that played 110? Where does that figure into it? Okay, I'm done. I'll shut up.
No, you don't have to shut up because Buck, this is why I love talking to you, because this is something that it's perspective. My job or my responsibility that I try to do is try to give perspective to whoever wants to listen and talk about it, because there are certain parts of the game where we look at it now where things get so technical, but the game of baseball can be simple. All right, how can you get the guy out consistently enough? How can you do those little things right? I mean, I know you held off telling the J.J. Hardy story, but J.J. to me, and I remember when he came over to Baltimore and was talking, and I remember that was the first time I was getting introduced, and my dad and I actually talked about that, and he goes, J.J. might be the most important piece of that puzzle because of what he does. He's not going to get the credit all the time, but he does so many things right that sometimes you can't magnify.
You know what else he did, Ryan? He made his teammates better. Mm-hmm. Leadership is about defining reality. JJ was like E.F. Hutton. When he spoke, people listened. But, he was great you should hear Manny talk reverently about him and John Scope. But it was about efficiency. It was
Mm-hmm.
about being efficient. I didn't necessarily want to look aesthetically pleasing. I want to make sure I give that feed to the second baseman where he can see it, throw it from an angle where it's not underneath my hip or anything. And he was always in the right place on cutoffs and relays. He was always, but he didn't have to go around and yell at people and this and that, whatever. He had that voice of reason. Hey, I've done what you're doing. It didn't end well. Don't do it because I did it and I stepped on my tail. Let's give you a shortcut. JJ made his teammates better, and that's a real quality of a leader. If people want to please you, and people wanted to please JJ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, JJ to me, I'm glad you mentioned about it. You don't have to be flashy to be a great player, and actually, it's the opposite. He
was in his own way, Ryan. I thought he was flashy because of his efficiency. It's like his substance was his style. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he honestly, and I still remember, and even how he was throwing at times. And I remember people going, "How does he do that every single time?" He goes, "Well, you know what? I don't really care. You know why? He does it well. The ball is always going to be where it's got to be."
I'll tell you some background. One thing I would do every spring was we would take infield outfield the very first day just to send a little message to anybody that had joined our team for another organization. And without mentioning names, some guys would go, we're taking infield every day. And Adam Jones and Markakis and JJ would tweak them, go, oh, yeah, we take it every day here. You better get ready. And they would like moan. But JJ, when he would take infield, as soon as he would get a ball hit to him, everybody would go textbook. They called him textbook because Chris Davis used to say he could hold his glove up and talk to somebody, and he knew JJ would hit his glove. I didn't trust him that much. But JJ was one of those guys where we don't make this a JJ Hardy show, but we should. JJ, you'd go, okay, guys, you get through with the drill. Any questions? JJ put his glove up, and I'd go, oh, God, here it comes. He didn't ask questions like Eddie Haskell. It was a good one. Hey, Buck, have you ever thought about maybe with a man on first, if we trail this guy and did this and did that? JJ, that's a good idea. Let's do that.
And there it was. And it takes special players to be able to then ask those questions and then have the trust to be like, yep, hey, JJ, go ahead. Go ahead.
We talked about ball down the left field corner at Camden Yards with a man on first, that you can't get into foul ground with your shortstop to relay the ball because the angle to the plate will cross the runner coming down the line. So that was the only time where you didn't line up in a straight line. You had to get a step into fair territory. So you had a throwing lane down there. And I remember one time we executed that play. And JJ was so excited coming off the field. There it is, Buck. There it is. There it is. But you see other people do it actually wrong, and they can't figure out why it's hitting the runner as he's going down third. Okay, right. I'm done again.
No, you don't have to be done. And this is great. And for anyone that's new to this, I think everyone knows who we're talking to, but we got Buck Showalter on talking about a lot of great stories, perspective in baseball here on the show. And look, Buck, the constant kind of, conversation of guys that you just mentioned, JJ being one of them, leadership, veteran presence. That's who JJ was. And the Orioles, when you guys started to turn things around, you had built a core of guys that had some veteran presence. Now, there were some young guys coming up. You mentioned Manny Machado obviously being one of them. But the reason why I'm asking this question, the Baltimore Orioles now, really young, talented core, but a lot of players not necessarily having that quote-unquote veteran presence. It's kind of crazy to believe, and it's time flying. I posted a photo yesterday on social media, 10 years since you won Manager of the Year in Baltimore, and now Cedric Mullins was a guy that was trying to come up through the system, and now Cedric Mullins is considered a veteran-type player for this team. Can you just talk about the value of what it means to have veteran-type guys on your team? Because, like I said, that's another metric, that's not a metric that can be quantified, having guys that have been around the big leagues with that experience.
Well, Ryan, it's got to be the right guy, though. It really does. Sometimes you see policemen come out of the academy and they are ready to do everything ethically right, and all of a sudden they might put them with a bad cop and they get all the shortcuts. They don't really. It doesn't mean police. It could be teachers. It could be coaches. Everybody's right. good and bad and everything. But
Right.
You got to make sure that when you have some adversity, you better have the right voice there,
Mm-hmm.
because there's just so much a coach and a manager can do. But,
Right.
we added Nelson Cruz. We added certain type of people and you can also take some guys on the fence that care about peer pressure. That's one of my things. If a guy doesn't care what his teammates think, he's got to go. He's got to want to please them and the fans, so to speak. But, people wanted to please Nick Markakis. They wanted to please Wieters. They wanted to please those guys. And they've got those guys there. I'm not so close to it. I really like the job that Brandon Hyde does. And, he's a part of the solution there. And I just, those guys are getting harder and harder to find, Ryan. Okay. Yeah. I remember years ago, we had some acreage behind our house in Baltimore, and your dad came over. We sat in a swing. We had a couple of miniature donkeys there. And I remember talking about this. Those guys are getting hard to find. And you got to know how to evaluate them, though. You got to know, what they look like. Brady Anderson knew, B.J. Sherhoff knew, Mike Bordick knew, Terry Crowley knew, Scott McGregor knew. You got to know what the feeling is, and there's no ego. It's just, you don't take anything personal, they say, because they've got a pure heart about wanting to win. And those guys, one, they're hard to find, but two, you got to know what you're looking for. And sometimes I think that's a challenge for some of our people. But, I don't want to be the old guy on the front porch screaming at the kids. I love the stuff that's going on. We were doing analytics and sabermetrics back in the late 80s. My wife was charting games for me, so I knew where guys were hitting the ball in New York Penn League. Heck, nobody was more into stuff like that than your dad.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is that all this conversation is not. We're agreeing. Analytics are a huge part of the game. It's a huge part of everything that's going on, and you want to know more about what you have, and if you have the opportunities to look at it. The biggest thing is, Buck, how do you take the information that you have and you can be able to implement it?
You're right. That's a good point, because I was looking on a coaching staff the other day. They had 12 guys on the coaching staff. 12. Mm-hmm. They had 3 hitting coaches, and that's great. Whatever. God bless everybody, but sometimes I wonder if we're confusing the players with so many voices and so many things in their ear. Every once in a while, you got to just get in the box and hit. I used to tell guys all the time, hitting in baseball is really about stretching out the good times and shortening the bad times. Everybody's going to have it. Guys in the Hall of Fame are going to have it. But I used to tell them, the heck with where your hands are, your feet, your stance, but write down what you're feeling when you're hitting, when you're going good, when you're on deck, when you're in the hole, when you're going home at night, when you're standing in the batter's box. Just talk about what your mindset and your feeling is, because that's what you got to get back to. It's not, people think that you can do something with, your hands and all that other stuff. Your swing is what got you to the big leagues. Your mind might keep you from staying there.
Yeah, well, the mind is the biggest part of it, right? I think that's where a lot of things can unravel for guys. You get there because you're talented enough. You stay there long enough because you're able to continue as you get older to understand how to adjust, and mentally, how to compartmentalize changing, the drastic changes. And we've seen it. We've seen guys that had unbelievable runs, and all of a sudden you go, well, what happened? Right. That's
like Adley, I get asked some about Adley, and the first time you're the best player in Little League, you're the best player in high school, you're the best player in college, you're the best player in the minor leagues. You come up and then all of a sudden there's some failure. Yep. Don't bet against this kid, okay? Because he's going to go home. The best development of players happens during the off season sometime, when you get away from it and everything slows down, and you want to be a pleaser, you want everything to be perfect. Adley Rutschman is fine. He's going to be a good player for a long time, and he will figure this out, and he'll be better as a result of some of the struggles, because he looks around and he gets a real grip on reality, and he's a smart guy. I like him having a big year next year, Ryan.
I do too. I think Adley, that's what I try to tell people, Buck, a lot. Failure is inevitable in baseball. Yep. Failure is inevitable in life, but specifically baseball, you're playing a sport where you're going, hey, guess what? You want to be one of the best players? You're going to fail 70%, and nowadays even 75%, but 70% of the time you're hitting 300, you're an all-star potential Hall of Fame player if you're able to do that for your career, right? The game is, you are automatically signing up to know you are going to struggle. And at the time,
that's why, one of the things you have to do when you go into a situation is you gotta basically eliminate the sympathetic ears. The sympathetic ears to BS. You'd like to have a locker room, and we had it in Baltimore, where you want some sympathetic ear to something. You go to Markakis, he didn't want to hear it. You go to Adam Jones, he didn't want to hear it. Oh, let me go to Weeders. Let me go to Hardy. And after a while, you look around and you go, maybe I should look in the mirror. Because that's one thing you have to do. You have to eliminate the sympathetic ears to the BS. And unfortunately for the players, with all the social media stuff that goes on, the only place that they can really rally and circle the wagons is in that locker room. Yeah. And that's why you're so protective of the places where a team can be a team. It's spring training. That's why it's such a precious time. The locker room's turned into an interview room for about, with the exception of the 2 or 3 hours before a game sometimes. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge to allow a team to mesh like that. And I think that's why it's becoming more and more rare to find those guys willing to be that voice in the clubhouse.
So then, hey, Buck, since it's playoff time here, and look, the results, because we know this is why it's not worth the time for me of, hey, who's going to win, what's going to happen, because the reality is all four of those teams, you're in the dance, you have a chance.
Exactly. It's why do we live in a world that wants to know about something before it happens? That's why we watch the game. They'll say, hey, how are you expecting so-and-so to pitch? I say, I don't know. Let's go. They're going to play that song about 6:55, and then we're going to find out. Yeah. I'm okay. That's why Las Vegas stays in business, okay? Because people think they can predict stuff. These are human beings. That's why they play the games. Now more than ever, it's just get a couple of hot pitchers with the off days, and run it. In a perfect world, they'd play 7 days in a row where you got to pitch your 4th and 5th starter. That's not going to happen because of TV. We know that. But if you really want to find out the best team, make them play the playoffs just like they do during the regular season. Make them use that 4th and 5th starter. Make them use that backup catcher. Make them use all the people that allowed them to win 90 or 100 games. Okay.
Yeah, it's true. I talked to Jason Worth about that for a while too with the Nationals. When the Nationals, I go, look, I was in the organization to start off my career with the Nats, and I remember there was a tense stress that the Nationals, they felt like perception, man, they can't get by the first round. And I was talking to Jason, I go, how frustrating was that? And he goes, well, look, it was frustrating we didn't get the win, but to call our season a failure, no, I said we were the best team. We had the most wins over a 5-year span or whatever it was. And things changed in the postseason. He goes, if we were equipped because we had a team, a roster that we could use our depth to our advantage in the postseason, we can't really do that. And if a team comes in red hot and they get you, or you're playing games at different times and there's shadows and a weird situation happens and you lose, he goes, that's what happens. So,
Ryan, let me tell you a quick story. I'm in Arizona, and when we traded for Curt Schilling, one of my points I kept making to our general manager, because Curt was hurt at the time.
Yeah.
And, he goes, well, he's hurt. I said, well, he's going to be okay. Our doctor said he's going to have it behind him and he'll be able to pitch in 99 and 2000, which he did. I said, here's the way the playoffs are set up with the off days. We've got Randy Johnson and Curt Schilling. If they win their starts, we're world champions. Yeah. That's simple as it is with the off days, and that's really what happened to them in 2001. Yeah. Those two guys, they ran the table. And so really you get into the playoffs and you get a couple of hot pitchers, because if the pitcher's on top of his game and hitters are on top of their game, the pitcher wins. That's why it's such, and that's what the Orioles have to do. They have to figure out a way to develop their own pitching, especially in where they are in the market. Because, Adley, I think Grayson Rodriguez was the last draft when we were there.
Yep.
We took him early on, and I tell you, looking back on the job that Gary Racich and Dan Duquette, look at their drafts sometime. Look back at their drafts and where we were picking in the first 10 picks a lot. You look back at their drafts, it was pretty impressive.
Yeah, actually, a lot of the teams specifically there that I can recall, when we look at the roster construction, a lot of those guys were with the Duquette era, you know, and obviously now you're looking at it, the combination traded over to get Kyle Bradish for Bundy. That's turned out well. Obviously the Tommy John did not, you know, Gunnar hit on Gunnar Henderson, hit on Adley. Jordan Westberg looks like a guy. So the combination, right? The combination of it, but there was a lot of good that's happened for this Baltimore Orioles organization. You know, Buck, how much time you got left? You got like 5 minutes?
I've got an hour. Take your
Okay. Well, how about we'll go 10 more minutes, because then I'll let you go and we can keep doing our own baseball stuff. But I love talking to you because I feel like I can just keep going on about baseball conversations. So let's flip this a little bit. We're talking about, you know, we can say about development, but here's another part with development or trying to get to that next level. I know that the cliche is it's the same game you're playing in the postseason, but you being there and you understanding what it is. I'm trying to set you up, Buck, to go, heck no, hell no, it's not. Can you talk about what the playoffs really resembles and what it's like for people that don't know?
Ryan, really, there's 4 times you manage in a year. You manage a certain way in spring training to get your club ready to start the season. Especially that last week is so precious. I always try to have night games to get everybody's clock on that time zone, because you're up so early in the spring playing day games at the end, and they really cooperated. But then there's the regular season game that you manage, where you're always playing the long game. You know, you may not always put your best foot forward in the extra inning game so that your pitching staff stays intact for the long haul. It's a cat and mouse game. Then there's this thing called September baseball, September call-up, when you got a couple extra players. Back then, you might have 10 extra players. It's not as pronounced as it used to be, but there's a little different way you manage in September with that sense of urgency. And then there's October baseball, where it's that game, that pitch, that inning, the heck with tomorrow for the most part, and you try to win each game, let the smoke clear, and then see where you're standing. And it's funny, you know, some people try to attack it with openers and this and that, whatever. And it's fascinating to me, the teams that carry 13 pitchers or 12 pitchers, somebody carried 11. You know, there's a different dynamic there they tell you the way they're going to play the game by the way they do their rosters sometimes. That's why. But the game, there's a sense of urgency and a sense of finality. The first time these great teams that have had a great season come to the park knowing, like, for instance, the Mets are coming to the park. They know that if they lose the next 2 games, their season's over. But they could win tonight. There's just a different brain set that guys have in the playoffs. There's a sense of finality to every day. And you got people around you that completely overanalyze every little thing. You know, so these guys up in the booth sometime, I go, really? But it's okay. And at least they're
hey, Buck, then I'm curious, then you're talking about overanalyzing what happens. Then as a player, even as a manager, how do you work through that? Is it experience? Because one thing, at least in Baltimore here, which it's tough because I feel for the guys for that, is that the Orioles now back-to-back years have gone to the postseason, right? And now they have 0 postseason wins, and 4 of which have been in Camden Yards. And they've had their opportunities, right? You know, and they've had their chances in the game against Kansas City, where you had even guys you wanted up and you just weren't able to capitalize. Is there any way in your mind that you would try to manage that, or how do you try to help players?
Well, there's, you know, that's a great question, because, you know, it's in you know, that their leadership team has got a feel for it. Okay, you get to the playoffs 2 years in a row, and, you know, I actually was in there for an event, and I was turning on the radio, and I go, man, boy, this is some negative vibe around the Orioles. Do they realize how good they are and how lucky they have been in a lot of ways? It's just such a roll of dice in the postseason. You keep getting there, and then it's, what have you done? We live in a what have you done for me lately world, and that's okay.
Yep.
That's okay. You know, that's, you know, the job description when you go into it. But it's I used to tell the players, you know, fans don't want to hear, or nobody wants to hear any excuses. Like when I managed the Yankees, I didn't talk about Mr. Steinbrenner. I knew the job description when I took it.
Yeah.
You know, nobody wants to hear you complain about him, but we had a sign up that said, play better. Just play better. Hey,
Yeah.
No, play better. Play better. That's all it is. You control it. I heard a great line. David Cohn got booed off the field at Yankee Stadium, and he had the locker right outside my office there, and they all came in and go, Dave, what'd you think about him booing, da, da, da? He goes, well, he said, I would kind of in the context, I would boo too, but he said, I control that. He said, if I pitch well, they'll be the first one. They're waiting to embrace me.
Yep.
Okay. And around every corner, you got to keep that in mind as a player. Sure enough, David's next outing, he pitched 7 shutout innings and a standing ovation coming off the field. And I tell guys, you control this. You control this. Play better. That's how it works. It may not be fair, and there might be 20 reasons why things didn't work out today that were out of your control, but nobody wants to hear it. You know, post up and play better.
Yeah, it's a thing with all the injuries. And Zach, you probably heard me say this before when everyone was going, oh, the team's too injured. It's terrible. Well, guess what? The whole league, everyone's going for him. No one cares.
You know what it is, Ryan? It's about the what if. That's something that I thought we did a good job with in Baltimore is, okay, this guy goes down, it's Ryan Flaherty. This guy goes down, it's Steve Pearce. This guy goes down, it's Nate McLeod. This guy goes down. You know, your what ifs are so important in a game that you play 7 days a week for 7 months.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's going to happen. They're not going to stop and say, we'll wait till your guy gets healthy. It's just part of it. And guys that can post up and stay on the field, now where does that get valued? You know, you're paying guys these contracts for what they've done in the past. Like they knew they could trust Cal Ripken with a contract. You know, they knew that from being in the clubhouse and watching his actions. Do you really know that you're going to, for every 20 contracts that are really long-term commitments, there's probably only 4 or 5 of those that you would look back and go, wow, that was a really good move. Because, you know, the commitment you have to make because what somebody's done in the past, you never know quite what you're going to get in the future. But it's about, can I trust you? And I tell players that, can we trust you with this commitment to you?
The trust and what you can, and that it is a crazy just how the system is, just the whole thing about through arbitration and trying to get to that second contract, because you're right, by the time age-wise that players get, and usually not most are getting extended. Now, some players did get extended early, like a Bobby Witt Jr. just did, Julio Rodriguez did.
But they're down there, Ryan. You know, the what ifs are down there.
Yeah.
I remember the first time we were looking for some juice in a spring training game. We call them the shock troops, the jicks, just in case. The guys that come in after the 5th inning. You were one of those guys, son.
Yeah.
And just somebody brought some energy and life and something. And I remember Brady and Bordy, it might have been Surhoff too. They said, hey, bring this Mullins kid over. He's a little bitty guy, but he's got a lot of energy. He brings some speed and quickness, and I'm not sure if they completely know what they got there. He wasn't drafted in the first, second round. He's a diminutive guy. We brought this guy over. I'll never forget. We were in Pirate City, and I said, oh, my God, this guy, look at this guy. He had that great face. He had that great, he had respect for the level, but he was competing at it. I remember that's the first time I saw him. I said, this kid is going to impact the big leagues. And some people looked at us like we'd lost our mind.
Yeah. And I remember even, it might have been the next year, maybe it was that same year. Remember he took Kimbrel deep in a spring training game to left. He was hitting lefty, took him deep to left. And I think it was in Sarasota. And I'm like, oh. And I had known Seti a little bit already, Buck. So I had played against Seti in the minors and talked to him. And I'm like, man, I don't think people really know how good he can be.
He had the it factor. Unless you were around him every day and you knew what you were looking for. Like I told you earlier with these guys that were such a great asset for me and Dan Duquette down in minor leagues that knew what they were looking for.
Yeah. And look now, I mean, Seti, even though I know people were on him, and Zach, you heard it too, a lot of people going, wait a minute, Seti's struggling. You know what you got with Cedric Mullins.
Hey, it's the very best, and sometimes they kind of outprice themselves for what they're going to be doing for you.
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, we play a day game, getaway day for the other team. And I would look, my wife used to talk about, where did y'all eat out? Well, we would get in a car and drive to Bowie, or we'd drive to Frederick, or we'd drive to Aberdeen. And we would go watch our minor league teams play and sit up, and that's what she ate, and so I got to see these guys in the minor leagues. I'd show up. I remember the first time I saw Jim Johnson pitch, we got through with the game, got through with the press conference, got in the car, drove to Bowie. He was on a rehab assignment. I walked in the back of the place 40 minutes after I did the post-game press conference. I was still in uniform. The look I got from Jim Johnson, He said, "Good God, don't you have anything else to do?" But it was
Yeah, wait, you were still full uni from the big league game?
Well, I didn't have time. I didn't want to miss his outing. I had just gotten there, and I wanted to see this guy pitch. You know, it's funny. He gave up a home run that night. Not that I remember, to a changeup he had been working on. I went in the dugout, and he goes, "I won't be throwing that changeup you just saw in the big leagues." I said, "I know you won't."
Hey, but that's the time they go down on their rehab assignments. This is the time to work on it.
If you're not there, though, you don't see these things. It's interaction you get with the players. But,
oh yeah.
You know, what else are you going to do on a night other than go to Bowie and watch a game? Come on.
Did you get, or you go there for food then? You get like a hot dog, or what?
I let my wife pick.
Okay, that's a great answer.
I tell you, they had great food in Aberdeen. That was really good too.
The Dean, man, you know, but this is, so there it was, you know, if you heard the rumors, Buck Showalter full uni going to a minor league game, it's true.
Well, I didn't have time. I could either change and get caught up in the locker room and miss Jim Johnson. You know, I don't think my wife went with me. I told her I'd be home about 8:30, and I was.
Yeah, say you were home when you were supposed to. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. You got to see the whole outing. Hey, to kind of wrap up a little bit, or one thing I was just curious of, not Oriole related, but because, you know, the Mets are hot right now, and then they've had a great run. You mentioned Lindor earlier, a guy that in the big city in the lights, he's been criticized a lot, and I'm really happy for him for what's going on with New York. And you got to be with him. And you mentioned that you felt he should have been a guy that should have been a Gold Glove candidate. He is an MVP candidate. He plays. He's dependable. Can you just speak on Lindor a little bit? You got to see it firsthand.
You know, Ryan, I got some grief at MLB TV a couple of weeks ago because I just can't vote for a DH for the MVP. I know Ohtani's a great player. I think a lot of people are looking at him through the prism of pitching. If he was pitching and hitting like this, you know, but guys that play the field 155 games, you know, you got to look at them in a different light. When I first got there, Lindor, because of his contract and all the commitment, he was trying to be the voice to the media, the leader, the guy that got on his teammates, the guy that went to every event. And I sat him down the first time in spring training and just said, "Lenny, I need you to play shortstop. That's what I need you to do. We got all the other stuff. We'll take care of that. Coach Steph, I want you to just go play shortstop."
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised. That's how you win New York. Go play it. You know, early in the year, Ryan, you remember they were giving him grief this year. I'm pulling for the Mets. So obviously, I got a little soft spot for him, and I know those guys. But Lindor cares, and he just wants to be everything to everybody. And I think he talked later, it took a weight off of him that he said, you know, I've been thinking about the same thing. I said, well, let's do it together. You know, if we got, and we'd sit down every day and shoot the stuff about it. But I think it just released him to just go play. And that's how you get by in the big leagues in New York, is go play better. You play good, things work out. They're waiting to embrace you, as David Cohn said.
They're waiting to embrace you. I love that, and that's the case now, and that's the reality of it. You can control. Well, I will say, if a pitcher's on that day and they're nasty and they're doing their thing, well, hey, you might have to tip your cap and go, well, we'll try again tomorrow. But other than that, when you go out there playing your position, you can go out there, you can play better. You can control and dictate of what can be the reaction. And then the best part is, Buck, you know, how do you respond back from that? How do you deal with adversity? Because that's usually what's going to define a lot of big league players.
You know, on the flip side of that, Ryan, how do you handle success too? You know, you see some guys, you know, it's tough to handle the failure, but see, sometimes guys get a little giddy. It's interesting to watch Rodon make the adjustment from, he was pitching like a closer his first outing. There's so much to expand. And this next time, you know, but keep in mind, he kind of fed off of what, what's the number one starter for the Yankees? I'm drawing a blank. Cole. You know, he said afterwards, you know, I kind of watched Cole, and but you can't take that emotion away from him. You know, the biggest mistake a lot of coaches and managers do is they try to put a thumb on a kid. Like, can you imagine if I tried to suppress Manny Machado's personality? The only thing I ever told Manny early on, I said, Manny, there's nothing worse for a team to be on the field backing you and supporting you, whether it's a dust up or whatever, in an unjust cause. Make sure that we're out there for a just cause. And sometimes we're out there for something that you did that really wasn't very smart.
Yeah.
So we'll back you publicly, but make sure what you do is for a just cause. And I think that's what, some leadership is. And it's been fun to watch Manny evolve.
Yeah, you know what? I'm happy for Manny. I was sad to see him leave Baltimore, and I know a lot of people can look at him, and they talk about being criticized for a majority of his career as well, because people look at it of going, "Oh, is there an issue with Manny Machado because of quote unquote antics?" I mean, Buck, you got to see the evolution of a teenager continue to grow up in the big leagues, and I always think it's misportrayed, and you would know better than anybody. But it's a guy that's not only evolved to be one of the best players we've ever seen, but the people around him that you're seeing, it's a different.
It's funny, Ryan. One of the things my wife tells me all the time is good women don't hang around bad men. Okay, if that makes any sense. And
it makes the world of sense. I'm writing that one down.
Manny's wife was always a voice of reality to him, and I remember the first time I saw him on one of those trips after a day game over to Aberdeen to watch him play when he first was starting out. And watching he and John Scope play grab ass on the field, it was hilarious. But I knew at some point they were going to get there. People couldn't figure out why he had never played third base. Bobby Dickerson, our infield coach, every day at 1 o'clock would go to Bowie and work Manny out at third base. We knew we were going to bring him up in a month's time to play third base. And people say, geez, he's never played third. And he's been playing it for a month down there. We had like sim games, inter-squad games just for Manny at 1 o'clock when nobody was there, and we would work him out. But, he was fun to watch the evolution. We've had some moments behind closed doors where it was some tough love, but now he and I are very close. I pull for him.
Oh, yeah, and that's the part of it. Again, I think that people do forget he was 19 when he got brought up.
Yeah, and he could do things but my point was, if you tried to make him play infield like J.J. Hardy, you were missing it. Yep. I see these guys try to take a thumb and suppress someone's, not necessarily style, but just, the end game, and even J.J. would go, I'm going to leave him alone. I'm going to let him go because he's got the it factor. And once you see that it factor, you get out of the way.
Yeah, you gotta let them be them. That's for players to be great. They gotta be themselves to do it.
Yeah, and I think some people, oh, geez, why aren't you tougher on them? Just, for instance, Brandon Hyde, I know behind closed doors, he's having some conversations with guys about different things. But, publicly, it just doesn't behoove anybody to be airing every little piece of laundry and critiquing every little thing that shoulda, woulda, coulda done,
Yeah, no, it's not really good. And you're talking about family and relationships. And one thing I try to tell the listeners out there and viewers, it's a sanctuary with the group in here. You have each other's back through good and bad, right? And you work together. And the teams that usually are the best teams is that they have everything's going to stay in house. You're going to work through it, and you're in it together. And then
it's a tough love among each other. I tell them, I go, managers and coaches are ships passing the night. There's going to be somebody. Billy Martin told me one time they're going to mourn you for about 5 minutes, and they're going to wonder who the next guy is coming in behind you. That's a little cold. But I told Manny one time, and I've told a lot of the young players, I said the biggest challenge and the biggest reward you'll get is to be a good father and a good husband. If you do those two things right, the rest of it I said, all this stuff is going to be fleeting. And I was always on Manny about, hey, how's your wife doing? How's your family? How's everything? That's the challenge in the whole scheme of life. And I try to keep a grip on reality with these players, because those 3 hours they're playing the game, sometimes it gets out of reality. You're not as good as they try to make you feel, and you're not as bad as they can make you feel.
That's a life thing right there. It's never as good as you think it is. It's never as bad as you think it is. And Buck, I kid you not, I could talk to you for hours, days about all this. You are and these. Okay, I got to know, what's one of your favorite quotes or sayings? You gave me the one. What was about with a good woman never hangs around a bad man? Was that the quote you just dropped on?
For the most part, good women don't hang around bad men very often. So if my wife would go, I'd say, hey, he's got a great wife. And it always make me look at him through a little different prism. Max Scherzer had a great wife. I used to love, Max would come in about 2 days after he pitched, and he would just plop down, close the door, clean the room out. He'd look in there and say, "Is anybody here?" And he'd sit down and go, "What do you got, bitch?" And we'd sit there and talk about life and baseball and football, University of Missouri, but about pitching. And Max was a baseball player who happened to be a pitcher. Yeah. He was a pitcher who happened to be a baseball player, and he was in every pitch. And everybody thought we were going to have problems. He said, "Oh, he's going to be hard to manage." It was just the opposite, Ryan. He was one of my easier pitchers to manage. I said, "Listen, when I put my hand out like this and you come off the field, you're done. Now, you want to go down the runway and bump heads, we'll do that and whatever." And he would tell me, "Hey, I got 2 hitters next inning. Probably if I flap my glove, be thinking about it. I feel better than I thought, or whatever." And there was a communication there. And he trusted me and I trusted him. He was an honor to have around. And he'd go pitch a game, come back to the dugout and look like a cheerleader in there. I love Max. But, you get to know those things. He was, I still talk to him now and then. He ain't going to quit. Don't sell him short.
Oh, no. He's one of the best competitors that I love to watch in this game today. And especially, that's one guy I will not count out. I don't care what's going on. I'm not counting Scherzer out. So I'm hoping he goes back this next year and he's back to being Mad Max and doing his thing on the mound, which he's already a Hall of Famer, but I'd love to see him continue on as long as he can.
Ryan, I'll give you 2 quotes. You were asked for a quote. One I've always liked is, "Never confuse change with a lack of respect for tradition." Sometimes there's some things that have to be changed. It doesn't mean you don't respect the tradition of that place. Some things got to be tweaked a little bit. The other one was I read one time and I carried it around for a while. Is that I wouldn't go back and change anything, but I would like to go back and relive it again. Not go back and say, "I wish I'd done this, done that." I'd like to share that memory again and see if it was good. It's a better way to put it. It's just, you can't go back, and you wouldn't go back and change anything, but you'd like to go back and relive it again. Because it was so much fun. People talk about highlights of Baltimore. I think coming back from Detroit after sweeping them and having so many people show up the next day to meet our bus at Camden Yards. I remember looking at the players when they came off the bus. There's a great Bill Parcells line after they'd gone down the field in an ice storm and never threw the ball 5 yards in a cloud of dust, and they punch it in, and he comes over to the offensive lineman and he goes, "That's why we lift all those weights." You have moments like that remind you why you do what you do, and you take some of those bus rides you talk about, and you take some of that pain in the off season when nobody's around. There are moments, and that's what I'm saying. You want to go back and relive those moments that verified why you did what you did.
Yeah, man. Buck, I swear, I don't know how you have all these quotes in your mind and the memory. Zach, behind the scenes here, when you were just talking about the exact moments of Jim Johnson trying to work on the changeup and the specific things, I tell him, baseball, the best baseball people, the memories like this. Yeah. It always stays. But Buck, I'm gonna need to get a book of all your quotes at some point. And you got to write a book for me with all these quotes.
No, the book that I've been approached a couple of times, but the book they want me to write I don't think it would reflect well on some people. I don't want to be a part of that. I really don't.
Well, just write me a book. Write me a book of quotes. That's it. I just want quotes.
I steal a lot. Trust me, I steal a lot of them. Okay.
They're your quotes in my book. But hey, Buck, I appreciate it. I will be sure to bother you soon. But thanks for taking the time, and have a great rest of your day. All right.
No, we've got a place up there. I'll be around. My son lives outside of Annapolis, so we get up there to see them. We've got a little place over, not too far from Baltimore. So I'll see you around, Ryan. Thanks.
I appreciate you. I owe you lunch, Buck. All right. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
See ya. So Buck Showalter, everybody, man.